Hi everyone, and welcome to a new session with Code with Sally. The session run every Thursday at 12 p.m. Eastern Time so far. If you have any questions, please, before the session, you can reach out to me on Slack or LinkedIn. And during the session, feel free to ask questions. All the questions are very important. I learn from them as well. I keep an eye on the chat if you don't feel comfortable asking question live. Like I keep an eye on the chat and I make sure to answer your question. And towards the end of the session, we'll try to keep like some time to answer questions, or I will stay a bit longer at the end to answer anyone's question too. For anyone who's joining, we have the Code with Sally YouTube channel. I encourage you to subscribe so you get notification when we upload new video. We'll have here a series for the beginners that we covered basic or like introduction topics like the data types, the for loops, the if statements, the list and maps and others. So if you have any questions about them or you want to check it, feel free. Currently, we are working on the intermediate series, and we have been working since we started about like the asynchronous Apex and what are the types for them. So you can go through the videos I sorted from oldest to newest to be able to see the oldest first, because we usually start with a simple explanation and we keep adding on top of it. Today's topic is a continuation for the Apex scheduler. We have two previous sessions. If you missed them, you can watch it where we explain the like why they need it, why is it, the simple like code or syntax on how to write and what interface we need to implement, as well as like last time we discovered together how we can schedule the Apex scheduler through Apex, the cron expression, and we shared a nice fun exercise to guess what the cron expression do. And we ended this session with a slide where we discussed together what we can do or cannot do, or what we can do, but we do it with care inside the execute. Because since we started, like we were always doing a simple scheduler class where we had in the execute method just in Apex debug log statement. So last time we discussed together that we cannot do synchronous HTTP callout, and we had a demo and demonstrated how that would fail. And then it's allowed to do it if it's asynchronous, and we had a quick demo as well on how to do it with future methods. We discussed together that chaining other Apex scheduler, it's not like it. If you do it, it will be saved. Nothing will stop you. But really, I don't think that's the best way to do it. And you will be risking to have the limit of 100 job limit to be exceeded. So it's possible. Just use it with care. So today we'll continue our topic from here. We discussed like the supported, because a lot of people has the mindset that we do the Apex scheduler only if we want, or if we have a batch class and we want to schedule it. That's right. It's one of the use cases we can do, but at the same time, we can do other stuffs without like having a batch job. Like we can have a regular Apex logic to run, like send an email just to query some records that we know it won't exceed the limit of the governor limits, and we can do some sort of operations for them. And you can do the enqueue batch job as well. So today, we'll start with this area. We'll explore together how we can run like regular Apex logic and how we can test it. Then we'll switch to the batch job and how we test it. Hopefully, we will have the time to finish this because there is like a slight trick or something that I learned about when I was testing. I was doing it without thinking about, and I want to share my findings with you as well. Okay, so as I mentioned, like the first thing is that we want to see, like, can we run regular code or simple code from the execute? Can you do that? Or you can have logic inside the execute method. Yes, we can have direct logic there. but it's not recommended. So we'll start first with the yes, and we'll try together. And then I will go to why it's not recommended and what's the best approach to do it as well. So let's open together. I will open a class called Opportunity Reminder Scheduler that I prepared. It's empty at the moment. So I know that it's a scheduler method or class, so that's why like I have implemented schedule. And we explained together before what implements means and what an interface and how you can create your own. And that's why, because it implements the schedule, we need to have the execute method. It's a must. So what we can do here is that we want to experiment together to have a direct logic there. So let's say I want to query some opportunities that it's not closed and they were supposed to be closed before today. And I want to create a reminder task. So can we do that here? The answer is yes. So let's do it together. So I will write a SOAP statement that will get me the opportunities I'm looking for. So we will select the opportunities we need, the fields from opportunity where is close is false and close date before today. We want to create a reminder for them. And we will put that in a list. And then I want to create tasks for each of those opportunities. So I can go for a for loop here, and I can loop through the opportunities, and I can create a task. And we learned together as well when we were talking about for loops, there is for loop for SOCL. So it's recommended that instead of creating a list of opportunities like that, is that you can write your query directly here. So I can do my select statement. And that's because Salesforce in the background will chunk it for you every 200 records, and they are not all stored in the list for memory. So that's what we have here. So we can remove this. So I just want to show you, some people would do it that way. Some people would do it the other way. In both cases, this is a best practice, or it's preferred, but some people still do this format. Especially if they know that they are not getting lots and lots of records. So let's do it this way for now. We'll create a task for each of them. So we are getting the opportunities and we're creating a task, and then we'll insert the list of opportunities. So maybe this is something we want to run like every day. So we know like, or every once per week, for example. So we know it will be limited numbers. So in case that I know that it will be limited numbers, and also one other thing that I would recommend that you do is to have a limit close. So you can have a limit, and let's say I know it will be maximum 1,000 records. So the limit is a good thing to add. And again, we can do this with a batch, but if you know that you don't have tons of records and you won't be getting tons of records, you don't need to create a batch for it. So now we have this logic in the scheduler. Let's deploy it and see. So it's deployed, it's good to go. So that's something acceptable by like that we can do, and nothing will stop us from doing this, and we can schedule it. So let's try to schedule it and see it together. I will go to the UI, I go to schedule jobs, and I can go and create a new schedule Apex. I can here opportunity reminders, task reminder, and I can choose now. If I go, I can choose from here what it's called, opportunity reminder scheduler. And then we discussed from the builder, you can choose the occurrence and when you want to run it, or to do a cron expression. And that means your code will be executed. The logic you have in the execute statement or the execute method, sorry, will be executed. No, nothing wrong with that. But the recommendation that we were talking about, like this is doable, but it's not recommended to have a logic directly in the execute method. So does that mean I cannot? No, I can still do it, but the recommendation is to remove the logic you want to have and to run directly in the execute, and we'll do a service class. And that will keep our scheduler lightweight. So that means if let's see it together, I have the class for you here. I was prepared to have it, and let's also put the logic directly there that we cleaned up. I will have it here. So it's the same logic that we have in the execute. You will just remove it. All what you do in scheduler, like service layer or service class, you'll find that it's a normal class and it has a static method. It's kind of like a utility, but we name it service. We remove the logic and what we want to be there. So it's nothing special. It's a static method that we have. If you remember when we discussed static methods you will be accessing it. Like if I want to remove what I have here in the scheduler and call my method. Any volunteer wants to tell me how to do it?
Yeah, you have to call the class and the method.
So do I need to create an instance for me from the class? Do I do like that?
No, you don't need to create an instance. You can just do.
We don't need to create an instance, right? And the reason is because it's a static method. So did I hear you right, Simi?
Yes, just use the dot notation.
Okay. So the dot notation, and we'll do dot, and we'll call our method here. So let's save it. Let me make sure this one is deployed too. So now it's all good. Now our scheduler is just simple as calling a method, and this method is handling all the logic. That's the recommendation that is like shared by Salesforce. And when I search online, people recommend it as well. Instead of having your logic or having your scheduler like really busy or has a lot of logic as well. And the best, like the benefit of having this as well, is that, for example, now if I want to use the same logic from a button or from a controller or from another functionality, like not just from the scheduler. Now you have this reusable. Like you don't have to put this code again in another method or in another class. If you need to access the same run reminder logic from two spots, one is the scheduler and another one a button or a LWC component, then you can like the controller of the LWC can call the service for run reminder logic, like or the opportunity reminder service. So again, it's a way to organize your code in general, and it will make it reusable. And at the same time, it makes your code clean, and you don't have a lot of logic in your scheduler. You delegate it to another class, which is your service. So that's the recommendation that we want to try and follow if we need to have like our own custom code to be executed. And again, the decision whether something like that best to go for a service class or a batch, that's something you have to decide depending on how many records you have. Like if you have thousands and millions of records that you are expecting or you want to handle, then definitely it's a batch class. If you know, like mostly it will be 1,000 records, 500 records, you are sending an email, something that doesn't need like heavy execution or so many records, then go with the service class and have your logic in it, and then call it in the scheduler. Now we created our class. We want to see how we can test it. Again, this slide, if anyone is attending other sessions with me, it will seem to be repetitive because I will say again, we'll use the start and stop test. We said before, like the start and stop test are our best friend, especially when we execute asynchronous apex. Because the first thing we learned together that asynchronous apex, it runs in the background, like we call it, but we don't know when it will be executed exactly. When the resources are available, it gets executed. And we said that this apply as well with the scheduler class, because yes, you will be scheduling it to run at 1 p.m., but it may like run at 1 p.m. in 2 minutes or 1 p.m. in 5 seconds. Like it depends on when are the resources available from Salesforce side to pick up your code. So when we use start and stop test, that's usually something that tells our code, no, I really want to execute it right now. And I want it to be done when I do stop test so I can do my assert statements. So you'll see me saying like do start and stop test. Between them, we'll do system.schedule. And like any test class, we have to have assertion. Otherwise, it will be kind of useless. And we don't do the assertion for the sake of code coverage. We learned together that it's very important. It's more for unit testing and for like repetitive test scenarios that you want to make sure your code is not broken. So it's more like a regression testing to make sure not to by mistake or another developer by mistake did or introduced a change somewhere or added a validation rule or required field flag or anything that will stop your code from working when it's deployed. So it's very important to remember that. Let's see it out together how we'll do the unit testing. So you will have, I like, again, it's a preference. Usually I like to name my classes for testing the same name of my class. So you'll find that opportunity reminder scheduler and I append the end test. It's a preference. The reason why I do that is when I go to my Salesforce, like here, the file explorer, I can see the class and the unit test class next to each other. So it's easier for me to know, yes, I created the unit test, or if I want to fix it or change anything, it's close by, like it's easier for me at least. So let's see now, like how we'll be testing this. So again, you have as is test to say that it's a testing like testing class, and we'll have as is test before a method too. And we always say what? Like we always say, I want to prepare the data, right? Prepare data and then execute code that we want to test. And we do the assertions. Like that's the pattern that we always say we need to make sure we have. And if you miss the unit testing, we discussed together preparing the data can be done differently. Like you can have a test setup method that you prepare the data you need in the whole testing class. If like you have specific scenarios you want to create for each method you have, then you will prepare the data within the class, within the method here, sorry, not the test setup. And the third thing we discussed together is the test data factory, where instead of, for example, if I need to create an account here, instead of creating the account here directly, we created a test data factory and we call the method here. So it's centralized everything we want to create in one file, which makes it easier in case like you add a validation that a specific field is required or something that affects everything. It's better and easier to change it in one file than going to different unit testing. But for the sake of this like example in this like testing scenario like we are running now, I'll be creating my data here. So what do we need to create? So here, what are we dealing with? We are dealing with opportunities. Like my whole scenario won't work unless I have at least one opportunity that is not closed, and the close date should be in the past. So that's what we will try to create. So I'll create test opportunity for my testing class. So we'll create a list of opportunity here. For example, I said I want to create only 3. I add to the list 1 opportunity at a time, and I give it the close date in the past. And it's very important when you create your testing data to make sure it match the criteria you'll be looking for. Like if, for example, I create the close date in a month from now, and I'm looking for the close date in the past, then my data here is not serving the purpose of the unit test. So you have to be mindful about that. And I forgot as well, like I need the owner ID to be my user. So let's see the test data factory we had here to create a standard user. So we'll use this and I will create my own user that we'll be working with. So in this one, return the user. It's not creating it. So we have to create it. So that's another example how we will be doing it. So here I can do user object. And test data factory, we said it's like a utility method. So I will go get the name of the method of the class. And I'll say here class name dot the method. This will return user. I will insert my user object. And again, this is already there because we did it in another example. So I'm using it, but you could also create a method for your opportunities too. And I will assign the ownership to my user. So that's the first part that we want to test, to prepare the testing. Now we want to start testing what we want to test. And we said like we'll be scheduling our scheduler. So we have to have start test and stop test for like enforcing Salesforce to schedule it at the time or to be done by the time we are done. And I will do here, I like to do indentation here. Some people, it's not needed. It's not an if statement or anything. It's just for me to see like, to be more visible what I'm running within the start and stop test. But like, that's just for me. My visual is sometimes very important to me to see it that way, but it's not, not everyone does it. Okay, so what are we expecting? Like we are expecting that we created 3 opportunities with a close date in the past. We are expecting that this one will schedule a job for us. And then when we will schedule the job has the service call. It will go call the service method for us, and that will create a task for each opportunity. So now we want to do our assertion. If our code got executed correctly, when I do the assertion, I should see 3 tasks got created. So let's try it out. I will do a query to get the tasks that we have in the system, and I will say here like I will check, and let's do the best practice we agreed as well on. I will do assert dot r equal. It's the same at the system dot assert. Let me take it copy and I put it under the other one so you have the 2 in front of you. So you can do it with system.assert equals. And if you remember when we were talking about this, we said like, this is the old way we used to do it. And Salesforce a couple years back introduced this assert class, and this is the other way we do it. So let's try. I will save here. And let's see. Okay, what's the variable? Okay, yeah, sorry. When I pasted 2 tests. So let's deploy. And let's run the test class for now and see how it goes. Now it passed, and it tells me that it got like the scheduler, the service. We have opportunity trigger, so it got executed too. So, and it tells me that everything passed and it worked as expected. So that's what you would do. But in my opinion, first, before I would tell you like what I would suggest that you do and like what I think it will help, especially when we move to the batch scenario. Any questions so far? In the chat, we are good. Okay, so now we saw together how we wrote unit test class for the scheduler and how we have like our test scenario and where we did the scheduler schedule for it and we executed and we checked the tasks and everything passed, no issues. What I would recommend that you split your testing into two classes. So one, to focus that the scheduler will schedule your class correctly, and another one to test your service separately. And the reason why I would say so, let's say your reminder service is used by the scheduler and it's called from a LWC controller. So you have, it's called from two spots. But tomorrow we decide that we don't need the scheduler anymore. When I will go and delete this, I won't have any code coverage anymore for the service because I did all my testing for the scheduler and the service in one spot, which is for the scheduler test. So if we decide that we will remove the scheduler, so we'll delete the test class because this code will give us an exception now, and it's named after the scheduler. So we'll delete it as well, most probably. And then we'll have the service not tested. So what I would recommend is we'll have another one for the service. So we'll have another class for the service and one for the scheduler and one for the service. So for the service, we'll have is something similar. We'll have, for example, I will name the function test run reminder logic create tasks. And here I can take the logic what we had here. I take it as is for now, and I'll tell you what we can change or what we have to change if we want to separate the two from each other. So I will have here, what I need to change is this line. I'm not testing anymore the scheduler. I'm testing now my service. So what I would be doing, I would be doing opportunity.service and run logic. Do I need still to have this test.start test and stop test? The answer is it's really up to you. Now it's not mandatory or it's not required because our code that we are testing, it's not asynchronous. The service on its own, it's not asynchronous. When it will be called synchronous. Synchronous mean like we won't go and get the list of tasks until this is done and the code come back from running this method. So the purpose of start test and stop test, if you remember, is two things. One is to make sure that the asynchronous code is done and completed. And the other one is that, for example, here I have at least 2 DML consumed. Let's say we have a very complex scenario and we test and we create 50 records. So I will have 50 created or DML statements. When you do start test, and like between the start and stop test, we have a new governor limit. We come here with 0 governor limits. And if you go back to the old videos, you will find that we have a video where we tested together And on purpose, we created like so many records here. And then we tested together without the start test. This failed because we hit the governor limits, and how when we put the start and stop test, it worked because we reset the governor limits. So again, it's really up to you. For me, I usually keep it to make sure I have fresh governor limits to mimic exactly what's happening when I execute the run reminder logic method. But again, it's really up to you. So if I do that and deploy, you notice that we got everything the same as what we had in the scheduler test. The only difference is we change what code are we trying to test. We are not dealing with the scheduler anymore. We are dealing with the service class directly. If I run it now, it will pass as well because it's doing the same exact things. So now I have covered the service class that I really care about with this testing scenario. So that's the first thing, like we covered the service. Do I keep what I have here for the scheduler? The answer is, again, it's something you have to discuss with your team. But for me, I prefer not to mix the two together, and I try to separate them. So now I have a testing scenario for the service on the side. And in real life, and as we discussed with the testing scenarios, you need to have different scenarios, edge cases. So you may add further or more methods as well in real life to cover different scenarios. So here, my main focus that the scheduler will be executed and run, not that the service will be executed and we create 3 tasks. So I don't want to do those anymore. Like I don't want to be working with preparing the data and creating opportunities or running this, because that's now something that will be like the focus of the service class. Here, my focus is the scheduler. So even I can change the method name. I will name it that the scheduler did not fail, like my scheduling or the scheduler got executed, like when we scheduled or tried to schedule the Apex scheduler class, this didn't fail. So what we'll do here, I will get the code for you and we will go through it. We said before that we have to prepare the data. Here, I want no data because I don't care about what will happen when the code in the execute will be called, because I moved that to the service test. All I care about is that the scheduler won't fail. Execute code that I want to test. So what I care about now between the start and stop is to schedule my scheduler. So I give it a name, cron expression. I give it the name of the scheduler that we want to schedule. Now the assert, I'll be asserting that it got scheduled correctly. So first of all, I'll check that it returned the job ID. So we said like when you do the system.schedule, you'll have a job ID. So that's first check. Second, when you get the job ID, you can use it in the cron trigger table. We checked it together last time. And that's where you can get like, what's the cron expression? When it got triggered, what the state, when it will next be fired. So I give it here a where close, my job ID, and that will return for me the cron trigger record. And here I can do that the expression is the same, like it should match the cron expression I try to use. So that's first check you can do. You can check that the state it's still waiting to be executed or acquired. So you can check. You can check that it's not complete, like it's not done. So you can do or focus your checks on the cron trigger. just to make sure that the scheduler didn't fail. Let me deploy this and run it to see the output as well. So now it passed as well. And you'll notice that it covered like mainly the scheduler. And definitely it will execute as well the service, but I don't want to be testing what will happen in the service here. I want to keep them independent. So that's what I would do. And we'll see that this is very essential to separate the two when we go and try it with the batch. And I will tell you why it's very important. But here you notice that now for the scheduler, or what we are doing is to schedule it and make sure that the cron expression, everything, the cron trigger record got created. What will happen in the service? We moved it to be tested from the service test. And again, let's assume now that we will go at some point and say, okay, I don't need the scheduler anymore. Let's delete it. We'll delete the scheduler and we'll delete the scheduler test. But if any other like components in our org is using the service, we'll keep it, and it's still covered and tested and secure because it has its own separate test class as well. So that's just my advice. Keep the two together, not together, separate. What you want to do, because we said the best practice is to move it to a service class, test the service class alone, and test the scheduler alone. Conrad, do you have a question?
Yeah. So, okay, everything you say makes sense. Okay, and I can understand what you're saying. What I have a hard time grasping or understanding. So, I've worked in Fortune 500 companies, large enterprises. Processing takes hours to get through the night and all various jobs. But I'm having trouble when I see your explanation and the so-called tests. Who is checking, or how do you validate how you're running in your enterprise? Like having other influences that may be taking your resources. What, I mean, is all this effort just for programming testing, or how does this work in an enterprise?
I'm not following. So you are
Well,
saying,
so okay, in my history,
mhm,
we have an operations department that will accept a job,
okay,
and a job will execute in production. So prior to them accepting a job, I will create a job, and I will one the will test to make sure everything's working like it's supposed to.
okay,
But before we turn it over to production, we have to make sure that that job will execute with all the other jobs. So, like, one job may take over a disk pack, and we can't use that resource. Well, we didn't know that while we were testing that that pack won't be available. So I see that, we're using these test parameters to check the code, but how do you fit your code into the enterprise to make sure you're not being impacted by other processes?
so okay, let me answer you based on my understanding of the question. And if I didn't answer you the way you are expecting, let me know. So
Okay.
in general, when we are working in development or Salesforce implementation, you do your code in a developer org. The developer org will have things more than what you have in production because other developers are working. So it's not the best like environment to mimic production, but we rely on like unit test classes like this. And if you go back to unit testing, we said like we have to think beyond just the code coverage, like not to be happy that I have 100% of the service covered and to be satisfied with that. Like if I have different scenarios, like I make great opportunities that will close in a month and test it again and see how it will behave when the query won't return anything. Will it give me an exception? It will succeed. It will behave as expected. So you have to think about unit testing as your first best friend that will help you catch like edge cases. And like you have the code, so you know the conditions, the extreme cases, the risk, what are you worried about? And you have this visibility. So you use this knowledge to write the best unit test classes to cover extreme scenarios and extreme cases. And the same when you test, for example, a trigger, don't be satisfied by creating a single opportunity and you're happy. Go and create 200 or like bulk to make sure that, and we did that when we were talking about unit testing, and we demonstrated how if you test a class with a single record, it may pass. But the moment we did bulk testing, it failed because we are not, at the time, we didn't bulkify the trigger the right way on purpose to see the error. And we saw together that this testing scenario help us discover this and not to wait until it goes to production. So that's what you can do during your environment. Like in development, you rely on your unit testing. You rely on creating data in your org to test different scenarios and whether you will schedule the scheduler to run after 5 minutes, or now you have this service, you can call it from the developer console and see the output. So that's what you would do. The next step is that we move it to QA, where like QA people, their job is to break your code, and they should know like to create different data and different scenarios to try and test it. We pass the QA, we move it to a full sandbox. I call it the UAT, and that should mimic like what you have in production in terms of data volume, because usually it's a full sandbox and you will have tons of records to mimic what you have in production. If you have different jobs in production schedule, you have to make sure that they are scheduled the same schedule in full or UAT, and same in QA and dev. Maybe in dev, the schedule will be different. The QA may be different because the QA want to run it during the day so they can see how it's working. But it's very advisable like to do the same schedule in like UAT to mimic exactly what you have in production in terms of data load and schedulers. And then you run it and you see how it will behave on real live data in real scenario and see if there is issues like you didn't think about. The other thing, like that's why, like I said, for example, chaining scheduled jobs, it's not advisable because you cannot, the code you cannot know 100% when it will schedule or what will happen. But when you schedule it on your own, you can see, okay, for example, I have something that will run on 3rd of July at 10 p.m., 1 p.m., and another one at 1:18. Let's say I want to run something else during the day. I will think like, okay, it's risky to run it at the same time of the 1 p.m., especially if it's both, for example, are touching opportunities. Like you don't want to lock the record or to avoid who will have priority or what will happen. So you have to look into what do you have in terms of schedule and decide if like what will run at 1 p.m. works on the opportunities, and you want to make sure you're not like overlap. Like maybe the decision would be, okay, I will run this at 1 a.m. So the difference between them is 12 hours. So you have to be thinking of what you have and what they need, and try not to break your system by like scheduling multiple jobs at the same time that may take long, that they may make each other fail. So that's another thing you have to think about. And that's why, like I'm saying, like in UAT, it's very important to have what you have in production so you can think about those user scenario, like use cases, and decide when you want to run it and agree with other teams or the business. Did I
So is
answer your
there,
question?
well, I have an additional question, but you answered my question. So, um, so when things are going through Unity, like, is it the Salesforce administrator that's deciding if it's a go or no go, or is there actually a change management team that decides what has the priority to be, like you can run this new production job at 1 o'clock, 1 p.m. as opposed to, and it won't impact your other jobs. I mean, who makes that decision?
Like, I would say it's a mix between like the technical team and the business. Like the technical team, it's a heavy job. It's running on a lot of calculation. It may like lock records, it may slow down. So you will advise to do it outside the working hours. And mostly the business will agree. Like, unless there is really a need that it has to run at specific time during the day. Again, you have to make sure that the business understand, like, it's not sharp 1 p.m. it will be executed. It may be, but it may take 5 seconds, 10 seconds, a minute to run. Like, you cannot be waiting for 1 p.m. to come for it to execute, otherwise it's wrong.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. So the next part I will try to cover today, and we'll see like if it needs to be revisited next time we can. So we saw together we can run direct code from the execute, the best use case, the best scenario, or the best practices to move it to a service class. But what if you want to run a batch job? Can you or you cannot? Like, that's the first question like we had before starting Apex Scheduler. So, and that's the most like use case where people think, okay, yes, I need scheduled jobs or Apex schedule to run Apex jobs. So the steps will be, again, you will have a class that implements schedule. This is our Apex scheduler. Inside the execute, now inside the execute, we had, for example, here, to run our service class code. Instead of that, we'll execute the batch. And we saw together when we were working with batch classes that we write database.execute batch and we give it an instance. And if we have the number of records we want to split the records into, if not, it will be the 200. And then the scheduler class can be scheduled the same way, either from the UI or using system.schedule. And it will behave the same way as any Apex scheduler that run plain code, or it run batch job in the same way. Instead of database.execute batch, you can have enqueue job. So like that's something you can do. When do you do that? When you have a batch that, for example, every 2 months, you run to delete old logs or to clear something or to fix data or to do some report or to collect data and calculate things. Like if you have something that run in a batch, but you want to run it on a timetable every 2 months, every week, every last day of the month, stuff like that, your answer is to have a scheduled Apex and to execute or execute the batch within the execute method. So let's see an example together. So that's a batch that we implemented together in the session when we were working with batch jobs. And we saw together why batchable, and that's the interface, and that the interface needs start, execute, and finish. I won't be going through the details because we covered this in a different session. If you need, like we have here on the intermediate, we have 1, 2, and 3 sessions about batch Apex. You can watch them. They are useful, at least from my opinion. I hope they are for you too. Now we want to schedule like this batch. When we did the session, we were running the execute batch from the developer console. Now we don't want to do it from the developer console. I want this batch to run once per month, or every 2 days at 5 a.m. Like I won't assign a person to go to developer console and do it for me. So I would do a scheduler. Again, it's implement schedule. It has execute method that is required. And here we do the execute batch. So far it's normal. We do what we are doing since like we started the Apex schedule. What I want you to be careful with, let me open the scheduler. And I want to show you something. I will get the code for it and show you the thing that I want you to be careful with. So let's say I would do like this. I would do a test method, and I would go with this, like we saw when we had the code directly in the execute. I could test like even by calling the service, I was able in the test class to test the code and see that the task got created. With the batch, things are different, but let me show it to you live. So we will create opportunities that we needed to be there, so we can call the query or the query locator return them. Then I would do a start, and I would schedule my job with the cron expression. And then I would do an assert. Like here, what we are doing is that we had a business type empty on the opportunities, and that's what I have here. It's empty. So it will come, and all the batch is doing is filling the business type to legacy. So I'm expecting that when I run the execute and do my assert, that I will have the assert true, that all the opportunities business type got updated. And that's kind of what we did as well when we checked that the task got created. So we are expecting, if I deploy this and run it, that it will be executed, no issues. Let's see if that's true in case of batch. You see here, it failed. And the failure, let me make it bigger. The failure, it's saying what? That we are expecting legacy, but the actual is null. So the business type did not get updated. Like the logic we have in the batch did not get execute. Like here, this code did not get execute, even though we have start test and stop test. I tried to figure out why. I couldn't find like something in the documentation saying so, because in documentation it will say like the stop test will make sure asynchronous calls are done. My understanding, this is happening because we have one level of the asynchronous to schedule that will be done, and the cron trigger will be executed, will be created. But the second layer where the batch is waiting in a queue to be like executed or implemented, that will never happen. Like it won't run. And that's why the opportunity business type will remain null. And that's why I said like separating the scheduler test in the service will become handy when you work with scheduling a batch jobs. So here we cannot test the batch job logic within the scheduler. Some people, I saw them doing something like this to force it to run, like to have, let me get the code here. So instead of doing the schedule like that, they do an instance from the scheduler and use it to schedule, yes, but use it as well to call the execute and pass the context, the schedule context will be null. So they are forcing the execute to be executed and the code to be there. I tested this and it's working, but I don't recommend it. Sorry, cron, yeah. I would not recommend you doing this. I don't think this is a clean way. And again, we want to go with the same mindset. We want to separate testing the scheduler from testing what is inside the scheduler. So now by calling the execute, it worked and passed. But again, I'm just saying, I don't recommend you doing that. What I would recommend you doing is to separate the two from each other, like to have something like this inside the scheduler, inside the scheduler test. Again, here we are just scheduling, and then you need the start and the stop test. And that's my preference. Whenever we have a code that we want to test, we do it within, and then you get the cron trigger, and we check like the name of the job, it's active or not, it's not completed. Like we focus the same as what we did with the service. We just test the scheduler to focus on the scheduling and the cron trigger. And let's see. I will show you. So now this is passed, and I said here this is optional because the system.schedule itself is not asynchronous. It's synchronous. When you do the schedule, system.schedule, it will create the cron trigger record for you. Again, for me, my preference is always get into the habit that the code you want to test to be in the start and stop test, but it's really up to you. So now what we did is testing the scheduler that it can schedule, but we didn't test the Apex. To test the Apex, we had this and we implemented this when we were working on the batch. We have the backfill opportunity test that was specific for testing the batch job, and we were doing database.execute batch. So you see what I wanted to show you, like it was optional when we were working with the direct code and the service class, but it's very important and essential when you are working with the batch jobs, because when you have a batch job scheduled, the batch won't be fired or triggered. So if you do the assertion in testing the batch job logic, it will fail. So split them and let's have this across, like if it's simple, or like if it's a batch job, like cron, like test the cron trigger and that you are able to schedule in the scheduler, and test the logic and what you have, whether it's the batch or the service class in the batch. And that's what we have here. Like we want to test, again, same, and we did the demo. We have start and stop. You can do the schedule, but keep it the assertion for the cron trigger. Don't do testing for the batch because it won't run. Do the testing for the batch in a separate class. Next time, I will leave you with this question. Sometimes, like you create a batch to clean up jobs, to clean up some data in your org, and you know that you want to run it only one time, but maybe tonight at 5 a.m. And I don't want someone to wake up at 5 a.m. and do it, but I want it to be scheduled for only one time to run at 5 a.m. And after that, I don't want it to run. Does it make sense to create a scheduler, Apex, and schedule it for just one time run? Or there is another easier way to do that? So if we want to schedule a batch job for only one time, I will give you the answer. You don't need to do an Apex scheduler. So we'll start the session next time and see how we can schedule a batch Apex to run only once without the Apex scheduler, to be easier for us and don't need to do all like the class for the scheduler, the unit test for it, and so on. I hope the session was useful for you, and I hope you learned something new. Next time, we'll continue our discussion about the Apex scheduler, and we'll discuss interesting tips and tricks and do or don't do or be careful when you are doing things in the next session. So hopefully I will see you next time. And from now to next time, if you have any question, send me on LinkedIn or Slack, and I will do my best to answer you. After stopping the recording, I will wait for you with you for a bit. Like if anyone has a question and they don't have to jump for another meeting, I'll be available with you for a bit. Thank you again so much, and I will see you next time. If you like the session, please share the video, and like if you can like the video on YouTube or invite other people to join the session next time, that would be great. And thank you so much.